Oh, hello, 2023, and welcome back to the Animation Industry Podcast. Now, I was crunching some numbers from last year, and overall, I published 46 episodes, which amassed a crazy 275,603 listens to be exact, which I think is quite insane. So, welcome back. My name is Terry, if you don't know. And I've been running this podcast this is the 5th year now, and I have no clue when I'm going to stop. So get ready for more episodes. Hi. Today's chat is with Robert Jonathan Koeyers, who is a multidisciplinary artist and filmmaker from the Netherlands, and we are going to chat all about his 2D animated film, It's Nice in Here, which was recently shortlisted for the Oscars. Now, Jonathan is going to share how he got funding, put together a team from scratch for the first time right out of school, and what the entire process of making an independent animated short film, Oscar-nominated, mind you, looks like. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hello, Jonathan. How's it going over in the Netherlands right now?
It's going well. It's going well. Yeah. It's 11 p.m., but I'm still fresh. Yeah.
It's super cold here in Toronto right now. We have snow, and I just came in from walking my dog, and I had to pick him up and carry him home because he wouldn't walk. Is it like that there too right now?
Yeah, it's freezing over here as well.
Oh,
No.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll get you going to bed soon. Don't worry. But thanks for joining me so late. I'm always impressed at, the types and people I talk to all around the world. It's amazing how kind of connected this community is. So let's chat about your film. It's Nice in Here. I'm wondering, for people who haven't seen it, doing the festival circuit, whatnot, can you give me kind of a short synopsis of what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Nice in Here is a short film about a young sensitive Black boy named Crimson, and we look at his life through two different perspectives: that of his best friend, and that of the police officer who shot him. So it is all centered around this really tragic police shooting, and we are trying to explore how stories get told about people who are no longer there to tell them themselves. So it's a very fragmented sort of like portrait of this boy in a very impressionistic way.
Yeah, and like the film itself is very powerful in how you tell the story from multiple sides, including the police officer as well, who is kind of not fitting in with his team and whatnot, and then does this. I'm wondering where did this idea come from?
So in 2016, I was graduating. I was studying animation in Rotterdam, and in my final year, I had to think about what do I want to graduate with, and the opportunities were endless, basically. So I was trying to look for a sense of direction, and I had always made very personal work, but I realized, looking back at all of the characters that I was designing and all of the people that I was drawing, that I was never really drawing people that looked like me. They were always like, I don't know, inspired by like the people that or sort of like the drawings that I was seeing online, or the people that around me in the Netherlands that I grew up with. But looking at sort of like my own Blackness and my own cultural identity, I never drawn people that sort of like had hair like me or had like the same complexion. So I wanted to focus on that. So I started just drawing Black people, and started also unpacking my own Blackness in a sense, and that I started traveling, and I started like also talking to other Black people about how they see themselves, and it was a really meaningful, beautiful few months. And at the same time, I was also hearing all of these police incidents and shootings in specifically from the United States happening at the same time, and there was like specifically this one shooting of a man named Flanagan Steele who was shot in his car, and his girlfriend was like sitting next to him live streaming everything, and I was watching it, and there was so much unfolding at once. Like you could hear their daughter in the back seat sort of like trying to console her mother, but also you could also hear the police officer panicking outside of the car, and all of these things happen at the same time. And for me, it was like this moment where I had never seen a police officer panicking, and I was thought like, okay, police officer shoots a person and then is sort of like, I don't know, I had imagined them being like cold-blooded killers, but seeing that panic, it was like the first time I saw that. So seeing these multiple narratives of the same incident come out of that was sort of like the catalyst for It's Nice in Here.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
long
a
answer.
yeah. No, but that's amazing. Thank you. I'm wondering if we can dial it back a bit. I'm just wondering. You said you kind of reached a moment where you started to realize that everything you were drawing in animation didn't really connect with who you were, I guess physically and as a
Yeah.
person. Why did you get into animation in the first place? What compelled you to go to school for animation?
Yeah. So I grew up in the north of the Netherlands, which is like very rural and um yeah, think farmland, the Netherlands, you know. And there's not a lot of like opportunities for young people to, I don't know, explore what filmmaking looks like or what animation looks like. And I had always wanted to become a director of live action films. And in the Netherlands, I thought there was only like one school to go to, which is called the Film Academy. It's very like official. And I went there when I was like 19, but I was probably way too young to get accepted there. I think they asked me like a question like, think of like a moment in your life that was very meaningful when I was like 19 years old and I had never experienced anything, you know, like I'd grown up in like a very small town. So yeah, that was already like a moment where I realized like, okay, maybe I need a little bit more experience. But I was also like a pretty like shy kid and quite nervous around a lot of people. So I was also like, can I really like be on a set and direct people and work with actors and stuff like that? Am I really equipped to do that? And then when I didn't get selected there, I had this big crisis in my life where I was like, what am I gonna do now? And then that's when I started drawing a lot, and that's when I started also animating for the first time in Flash and making these really crappy animations, like really bad ones. Um, and I started getting better at it, and I started like doing frame by frame animation. And um, that's when I also realized like, hey, with animation, I can actually just make whatever story I want to make without
Yeah.
having to direct people or having to be on the set. I can literally, if I can draw it, I can tell any story I want to tell.
So growing up like small town farmland, you wanted to tell stories and saw like directing as a way to do that. But then when you didn't get accepted, you had a little bit of a maybe a crisis, it sounds like.
Totally.
And then
Yes. Yeah.
you're like, how can I still tell stories? And you started drawing them, I guess. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. For
Wow. And
sure.
then so like you really fell into animation because of like storytelling, essentially.
Yes.
Like, because I'm wondering, like, how big is the animation industry in the Netherlands, like compared to like North America or the UK or whatnot? Like, I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's not huge.
It's not huge. No, no, no. There's a couple of like studios that are making really excellent work. And there's a couple of like independent filmmakers that I know, like animators.
Yeah.
But it's still a very small, like everyone knows each other, you know, like you can count on one or on two hands, like the studios, and it's
Right.
still very, very small. Yeah.
So then you went to animation school still with the same goal of telling stories, just through animation in that sense? Because
Yeah.
one of the questions I wanted to ask was why did you choose animation to tell this story? But maybe I'll ask that later. Okay, so you're in animation school, you're telling stories, and then you have a moment where you like, can you describe to me that moment where you kind of like looked at your work and didn't feel like it reflected what you
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think in my first year at the academy when I was studying there, I thought I had to be like the best animator. I got
Every first
accepted.
year does.
Yes. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna like study the animation survival kit and I'm gonna animate. I'm like this is going to be my life, you know, like animation, and I'm gonna be the best animator. And in the second year, I was sort of like reminded again of like why I wanted to do animation in the first place, which was telling stories.
Yeah.
As opposed to simply focusing on the craft and simply focusing on getting every movement right. So I started making more personal work about me and about yeah my memories that I had. And it was also the first time that I started experimenting more with like I guess the medium and the technique. So in the first year I did all 2D work, all like still in Flash or in other programs. But in the second year I was also combining that with like live action. I was doing some pixel art. I was doing some 3D, some stop motion to tell personal stories. And then in my third year at the academy, yeah, that's when I started wondering. That's when I started analyzing my work, I think,
Yeah.
because at the end of every year, we're also like forced to look at what we've done that year and reflect on that. And that's when I started realizing, like, hey, all my characters are like white blonde people. And how do I change this?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you wanted to be the best, then you experimented, and then you kind of reflected, it sounds like. So like, did your goals like with your storytelling and animation change when you realized that? Did you have like a moment where you're like, now I need to tell different types of stories? If you were telling stories before just with not characters that reflected who you were, then I'm
Mhm.
assuming there's some kind of change that
Yeah,
happened. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think, yeah, in terms of it, I think it became easier to tell stories, or it
Ah.
became like I could look at the people, I could look at my own life and I could look at the people around me and base my stories off of experience that I had, as opposed to what I saw on television or what I saw around me, you know, like, so things became, it feels like my stories have become more authentic once I started realizing, like, hey, let's keep the stories like close to me and close to the people around me.
Did you
Yeah,
see when that shift happened and you were producing work with that new shift, did you see different response to your work from people you were showing your work to?
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, so I moved from like this little town to Rotterdam, and that was also like a really big shift, you know, like in Rotterdam, I saw so many people that look like me, and it was also like such a refreshing thing. But having these people then also look at your work and engage with your work and talk about your work and connect with your work, I think that's like the most meaningful
Yeah.
thing, you know? Yeah.
So like before they weren't engaging in the same way, I guess.
Or
I'm just like, it
yeah.
just sounds amazing to me that you connected more with yourself and you produced, like you said, more authentic stories that felt true to you, and you got like a greater response from people who are watching your work too. I think that's amazing. So okay, so fast forward a bit, you finish school.
Yeah.
How do you go from like, hi, I'm fresh out of school, I'm going to produce a, Academy Award nominated film in
Right.
my, like, is my first thing, like like, you've got budget, you have a full team, you have voice
Yeah.
actors who are amazing, you have like an art director you found, like all
Yeah.
this, like how does that happen?
Yeah. Um, I guess that's like the the luxury or the privilege of living in the Netherlands. We have like something called the Film Fund,
Hmm.
which yeah, like it sounds, it funds films. So they have what they do every year is that they look at graduation films, like thesis films, or you can send it in, you can submit your thesis film, and every single year two animated short films or graduation films get selected. um and this is often these are yeah, these are often films by young directors or first time directors that have a very specific voice or have something to tell or do something different in terms of storytelling or narrative or visuals. And I submitted my thesis film and I won. So that was really great. And basically, what it means is that you get 50,000 euros
Okay.
to make whatever you want to make, like or a short animated film, a new short animated film. But the theme, story, all of it, it's like completely up to the maker. So they're not telling you what to make or what you can't make. So that was it's a lot of freedom, and for me, like 50,000 was like, it felt like a million, like a
Yeah.
million bucks. You know, I was like, whoa, I can do anything now. So that was yeah, that was a really amazing experience.
So you get $50,000 in your bank account, and then what?
Yeah. Then partying. No, it was looking for a producer first. Or actually, like the producer found me because it's also nice for a producer because they don't have to go through the whole process of you know, like submitting their ideas to the film fund or stuff like that. The money is already there.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, it was trying to look for a producer. Even as a recently graduated student, I was also had to think about, what does a producer do? Like I had never worked with a producer before, so all of it was new. Having this money was new. Being able to work with a team was new. So um, the good thing is that I already knew what kind of story I wanted to tell because I wanted to, yeah, this was my entire final year of the academy was like focusing on blackness and seeing what was happening and trying to already like imagine the film in my head.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, the money came in handy. Yeah.
So, so your producer's like, "Hello, you have $50,000, and I'm going to
Yeah.
split it up for you." How is how
Yeah.
is that experience? Like, you just kind of put full trust in this person and say, like, you know what you're doing. Let's figure this out together, and then you start hiring a team. Like,
Yeah.
wow,
Basically, yeah, it was a little bit of shopping first for producers, like
yeah.
I had a handful of producers that was interested in working with me.
So
So
how did you pick one? Did you interview them? Did you like look at their track record? Did you
yeah,
just like say like, what does your
yeah.
hair look like? Like, I don't know.
All of the above, yes. I looked at their work, I looked at their track record, I had coffee with them, I had a conversation with them, and um yeah, it's a lot of it is like vibes, It's like how do you feel about
Of
that
course.
person?
How exciting was it to be like, I'm freshly graduated, I have this money, and then go to coffee with like somebody who's like actively trying to like work with you? Did it feel, how
Yeah.
did that feel?
Very exciting, but also
Yeah.
strange, like it's like they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them at the same time. So we're both at that
Right, right, right.
level. Yeah, yeah,
Wow. So okay, so then you like, did you pick the whole team, like the art director and the voice actors and everything, or like does the producer have connections? Like, like did you hire like your fellow classmates? Like, did you go on Instagram and like find cool people that you liked and just be like, hey, do you have like how did all of that happen?
yeah, yeah. So I work with a lot of my old classmates that were also recently graduated, looking
Yeah.
for work.
Right.
So I was like, well, I happen to be working on a project. And the first person that I found was my art director because it's so incredibly important to have that be like a
Yeah.
strong connection, like,
Why didn't you want to be the art director? Just curious. You like you said you were
yeah.
designing your own characters and you're an animator and you want to be the best animator and like
Mhm. Yeah. I think I was very used to doing everything by myself,
hmm,
which is also the reason I got into animation because I wanted to have that control over narrative and over design and over movement. But I thought to myself, like with this money, which is like a blessing really that I have, being able to work with other people and having that experience is something that I really want to have.
yeah.
So instead of like wanting to do everything myself again and just paying myself the 50,000, I thought of like I want to surround myself with people that are better at things than I am and learn from the experience of working together. So yeah, the art director was just like a very it was yeah it was someone I was very close to. We were really good friends, but also she was incredibly talented. So together we were talking about, okay, what can we mean for each other? And yeah, she was the right fit.
Nice. And then you also wrote the script too, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
like the script is amazing, like just the storytelling and how everything like plays together and kind of like the mystical theme of like the afterlife and stuff that plays into this. Like, have you had writing credits before, or you just like, I'm a great writer automatically? Like, what happened
uh,
there?
well, I always liked writing. I think that was like sort of like when I was still living in like the north of the Netherlands, I was storytelling was like the thing that was moving me. So writing the script was like something that I was actually really looking forward to as well. I think very much in images, and then I try to like transform those into words and find a good tone of voice. I think is also really important. Like you which what story you want to tell, but then you have to think, how do I want to tell it? And
Yeah.
for me, that's a really interesting challenge.
I mean, it sounds like you have a lot of confidence in like pushing kind of the writing and storytelling forward. So
Yeah.
I'm just impressed.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I would say like more so than animation. I think
That's
even.
crazy. You're like
Yeah.
my next project. I'm just writing it. Somebody else can. Did you do any of the animation actually?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Sorry. You animated still.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so like when you're producing this film and you have the money and I'm assuming everybody kind of worked on this part-time between other projects because like,
Yeah.
50,000 isn't your credits are huge, so it's not enough to support everybody. Was it difficult to like project manage this like, it's not like a 2-minute short film. Was it
Yeah.
difficult to project manage this thing and like have it all come together and the style is beautiful all the way through and like the attention to detail and like all this stuff? Like how
Um,
did you make the best use of everything?
mhm. Yeah, it was incredibly difficult. I think the film also just like it doubled in size, you know? Like I think it started off with because when you get the 50,000, they say like we want you to make a film between 3 minutes and 6 minutes. And I convinced myself that I could tell this story in 6 minutes. But then when I was writing it, it became like 9 minutes. And then I made the storyboard and the animatic and it became 11 minutes. And then now it's like, yeah, 15 minutes. So it became like more like bigger and more expansive over time. But yeah, no, budget wise, again, it was like the first time that I was doing this. So I had to learn a lot about like um first of all, who do I approach, but also what do I need them for? How do we divide all of this and how do we manage it all? So a lot of it was like trial and error of like seeing what works and what doesn't work. Um Knowing how other people like working as well. How do we communicate? How do we all work together, like yeah, because the team, I think we started off with a pretty small team, but over time we just realized like we really need more people.
Yeah, nice. I'm wondering, what was your kind of goal? Because I'm assuming you're like running off with what is the expression, like a chicken without a head or something
Mhm.
during
Yeah.
during this experience. So like, what was your overall goal of the film? Like, obviously, it's met a lot of success and connected with people around the world, etc. So as you were going through this experience, what was that driving force keeping you on the right track the whole
Mm.
time?
Yeah, I think as we were making the film, we constantly had like these reminders, like by watching the news, like turning on a
Mm,
television and seeing that the thing that we were making the film about was still happening in real life, like where so many other unfortunate like police shootings happen. And I think that was for us at least, or at least for me, that was like the motivation to also feel the urgency behind the story and want to keep telling it. But for me, it was also about just like on a more personal level, like there's a part in the film, there's a scene in the film where the girl mentions like our skin, and then we see all these different shades of black skin. To me, that was like I think the most important part of like for me, be, that blackness becoming like a norm for me and becoming like the default and being like this is the story that I'm telling for myself, but also the people that look like me.
wow. I'm just wondering, since the film has come out and it's gone to the festivals and everything, what is the response you've gotten from producing something that it's like especially, well, I'm not in the US, but especially in the US, it's like a big topic all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I think it's interesting that uh, you produce something that can connect not only with issues in the US, but around the world. What has been the response to watching your film?
yeah. Um, so I was in Los Angeles like last week, and to screen the film, and it was the
Yeah.
first time that I was there during an American screening. So I was very I was quite nervous to kind of like see like how are people gonna respond to this film? And it was a really lovely reception, and it seems like it really resonated with people.
Yeah.
So I was very glad about that. But I mean, yeah, the film went in premiere in Cannes. I was also like, how do people there respond to the film? And it had a similar reaction. It was like the same. I had like people come up to me afterwards and talk about their experience with police officers in France or in Belgium. And so it was like it, even though the film optically and aesthetically is very inspired by like a version of America, I feel like people globally connect to it, to
Yeah.
the characters and to the story. It's
So like
great.
overall, what is the, I mean, what do you hope people get out of watching the film then, I guess?
Yeah. Um, I think we present the film very much as like the viewer becoming like part of a jury, and there's like two testimonies by these witnesses, and we as a viewer, I'm more interested in like asking questions of like what do you think happened, or as opposed to like explaining things or giving answers.
Yeah.
And the film is sort of like, if you look at it, it's there's all these small moments like sprinkled throughout the entire film, like these really short 1 second shots that could be a possible, yeah, could be the possible answer to sort of like have you think about what could have actually happened. But we're never very explicit about that. But at the end of the whole film, I think also it becomes a very like false dichotomy, of like it doesn't, it's no longer about like choosing sides of who is wrong or who's right. But at the end of the day, there's this reminder of like, hey, at the end of the day, a kid still was shot and was killed. So yeah, how how productive is this conversation about the truth or the non-truth, and talking more about like, hey, let's talk about the thing at hand.
Yeah, I like how like once you said it was like a jury, like looking back on my experience in the film, I didn't make that connection, but it totally makes sense of how you presented like the storylines and everything and kind of the quote unquote evidence as well sprinkled throughout too. So I think you did a really good job, and like it really makes you think, and it's a very emotionally driven film as well, which I think is really hard to do. So I commend you for that.
Thank
I'm
you.
wondering, now that you've finished this film and it's gone on, and what are you working on now? Are you doing more directing? Are you? Yeah,
um Yeah, well, I needed a break afterwards because I was
yeah,
like
I can
burnt out.
imagine.
I think we spent like 3 years working like in production on this film, and
Right.
it was um very, very exhausting and very tiring. Also, just because it's a heavy film, and like you wake up thinking about it, and you go to bed thinking about just like these really traumatic
Wow,
images.
for 3 years, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
What were you also
um
doing during? Were you just working on the film full time for these 3 years yourself?
Uh, it started off like that, but then I also started teaching
Hmm.
at in Rotterdam where I was studying. So that was nice. So I could combine the two. Um, so but most of the time, yeah, I was always uh in my head I was always like working on the film. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have a
Yeah.
huge sense of release once it was like the credits rolled?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's like the best feeling. Yeah. Um, I mean, it took a while, I think, um for us to like be able to sit back and sort of sort of like let the film wash over us, but um yeah, I don't know, seeing the first edit of the film and seeing how it all works also together with the music and the sound design and the voiceovers, I don't know, it's like a really, yeah, it's an indescribable feeling, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So what? So sorry. What are you doing? What are you doing now?
Yeah, now I'm in the process of, I want to work on a documentary. So I did a lot of like research for this film. I traveled to the United States, and I also went to parts of West Africa and to the Caribbean where I was born, to explore what Blackness meant to other people, and in turn what it also means to me. I talked to a lot of people. I gathered a lot of footage, and I did a lot of interviews. And as I was working on It's Nice in Here, I dropped my hard disk on the floor, and I lost a lot of footage.
Oh no. Oh
Yeah,
no.
it's so, yeah, backing up is like the yeah. Please back up your files. Do that, like keep doing that. I didn't do that, so I lost a lot of footage, and I kind of want to now make an experimental sort of film, a fragmented film about what that loss means, and
Hmm.
make a film with those holes and try to fill them up with animation and archival footage.
Oh wow. I like when I work on a film, I have such a strong idea. I don't waver at all, but it sounds like you're more about like just figuring out what the experience is going to be and then
Yeah,
making something from that.
yeah,
If I
yeah.
lost my footage, I'd be like, I'm done.
I'm
Canceled.
done.
No more.
Yes.
I'm done.
No
And you're
movie.
like,
Yeah, the movie's
let's
over.
use this.
Yes. Well, it took me a while to get to that point. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
In the
I'm
beginning, I was
sure.
also like, oh no.
You went through the seven stages of grief or whatever.
Oh, yes, yes, for sure. Yeah. But I think I really like an intuitive approach.
Mm.
So I started off with like live action filmmaking. So editing for me is like such a natural process. And in animation, it's sort of like it works the opposite, right? Like you edit in the animatic and you want every choice to be made before you start animating in the production phase. And to me that it feels a bit counterintuitive to my process.
Hmm.
So also for this film, for It's Nice in Here, we had the film and we had like the whole structure and we storyboarded everything that was in the script. But to me it felt a bit static. So at the end, I called my producer and I asked him very kindly, like, can we add more shots to this film? And I was expecting him to say no, but he surprisingly said, yeah, go ahead. So
What if he said
I
no? You'd be like, sorry, we're doing it anyways.
yeah, probably.
He foresaw that.
Right. So I went to all of my animators and I just said like, hey, if you have an idea for a shot, anything, just make a quick thumbnail of it, just make a quick drawing, show it to me, and if I like it, if I think it could fit somewhere, then just make a quick like animation test of it.
Oh,
So at the end,
wow.
I had all of these small animation tests of like a shot of a butterfly against the window, or like a shopping cart on fire, or stuff like that. And I had actual footage to edit with, and for it to still feel very fragmented and intuitive.
Wow, that's really cool that it's also like your film is a little bit of a collective experience of other people experiencing what you wanted to show them and them reflecting back what extra could be added. I think that's really cool. I haven't really heard too much of people doing that before. So
Yeah,
it's really great.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
you're working on this documentary now. Is it also funded through the government as well in the Netherlands?
Not yet, but hopefully it will be. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. So what is the process to do that? Like, you're just like putting together a pitch right now and then
Yeah, yeah,
gotcha.
exactly. So I have to find a producer to work with me, and basically I have to write a plan and convince the fund to invest in the film. Yeah.
Wow. I'm just curious, like when you think about like your overall career path, is this like essentially like you as a filmmaker, is this kind of what you are doing now is like what you want to do? Or is there like an ultimate goal, like you're also teaching or like,
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, um I feel like I'm slowly working myself up to maybe a feature animated film, but it feels very daunting, you know? It
hey,
feels
you're
like
already directing shorter things. That's how all directors get started. So
yeah, I guess so, yeah. But I mean that would be the dream, I think, of telling very authentic stories that I haven't seen before
yeah.
and yeah.
Do you think if say you direct a feature, do you think you'd be able to stay in the Netherlands to do that?
So I always had dreams to not stay in the Netherlands and to move to, I don't know, the United States or Canada or whatever, and work there. But I don't know, like I feel like we have it pretty good here with like the fund, you know? Like I feel like just if you have a good enough idea, you have a producer, you have like people around you to work with, you can just get like money to make that film. And I feel like that's such a wonderful system, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, we have like the film board in Canada here, the NFB, which does that as well. But they don't just let you make whatever. Like you have to like pitch an idea. It has to be
Hmm.
like relevant or
Yeah.
technologically, different or something. I don't think they have that too much in the US, but there's a lot of European countries that have that as well too. I just
Yeah.
talked to some people in Portugal that have funding from the government too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
super interesting. Yeah, I think that's like, how many other people in the Netherlands are kind of taking this path of like being, independent filmmakers who are telling like, authentic stories like this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like what this film has done for me is that it also introduced me to all of these people.
Yeah,
So
you're
I
part of the club now.
exactly. So I'm meeting these people, like and it's really nice to see how to also learn from their journey. And um, like I have people telling very authentic stories about their experiences of thinking about motherhood, and other people that are making films about Colombia and their experiences there, and then moving to the Netherlands. So it feels very, it feels really nice to be part of those people who are also using animation to, look within themselves and tell very introspective and honest stories.
Nice.
Yeah, they inspire me, and hopefully I inspire them as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like your journey as you kind of like, you wanted to tell stories, you got into animation, you had like a self-realization moment, and then you produced something amazing, and now you're on the path to make more. I think that's great. Looking back, what was the most challenging part of this journey for you? Because, telling it in 20 minutes sounds super easy, but like,
Mhm.
you're going through an emotional roller coaster, I'm sure, or like even financial distress, and like, support of family and friends and whatnot. So like, what was the most challenging thing to get you to this point here today? Even just like, it might just be like sticking with the vision.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I think we had a lot of um yeah, hardships. I mean, I feel we started working, we went into production with the film in 2020. We had like a studio. It was really nice to be in the studio together. We had an intern, we had lunch together every day. It was really like a cozy place. And then we had to leave the studio in March of 2020 when coronavirus happened.
Right.
So that then we I mean, it was nice that we could continue working. That's the benefit of animation. But trying to recreate that on like Zoom calls and Discord and stuff like that, it's a bit tricky, like you wake up and then you go to your computer, and then you turn on Discord, and then you have those calls of like, hey, so how was your morning? And then it's just it's different. So we try to listen to a lot of podcasts and still have like a nice sort of like uh cozy feeling, but it's not the same as being together in the space. And of course in 2020 we also had like the murder of George Floyd, which was also a very yeah, a tragic happening, which influenced the whole production as well. And in those cases it was also very nice that we had each other to help each other through that. But yeah, that was definitely like a really painful moment where it was very difficult, to want to humanize a police officer and look at the world through his perspective. So those were definitely like, I think, the most difficult parts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, for anybody that's seen the film, like, that makes total sense. It would be super difficult to produce something while world events that are extremely relevant to what you're producing are
Yeah.
happening, and seeing the response to those world events. And then were you kind of afraid at some points of like, how people would take you humanizing a police officer?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think as we were making the film, um we felt, especially during those months, it felt like we were almost being too nice for the police officer,
Mm.
like we are not, the film never um sort of like punishes the police officer for his deeds, which was a very deliberate choice because we wanted to leave that up to the viewer of how they perceive the story, and how their maybe how their implicit biases affect how they interpret the story. But yeah, I don't know. There were definitely parts where we thought about changing the ending, of like, hey, what if we put him behind bars at the end, or what if we have a little bit of poetic justice at the end. But it just didn't feel true to the story. It didn't feel, it felt a bit more like a reaction to what we saw happening in real life, as opposed to, will this really be the best way to tell this story?
Yeah. Wow. I'm wondering, for other people who are listening to this and want to produce their own films and their own stories. From your experience on this, what would you say were maybe the three biggest factors to creating this success as a film? And it could be
Hmm.
like, the art is amazing, the story is amazing, the people you work with is amazing, or the topic is relevant, or what would
Yeah.
you say were the kind of three biggest things that contributed to your short film being the success it is?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, I think the team, this film would not have been anything without the team. So I think it's really important to surround yourself with the right people, people that also have the same feeling for the story,
So
or
did
people
you
that are
pitch the
really,
story to all the animators and
yeah,
everybody before and like kind of see the vibe that came off it?
absolutely.
Did you turn
Yes.
people away because they didn't really connect with what you were doing?
Um, I don't think it happened. I don't think that happened, as far as I know. Maybe I
Okay.
did, like subconsciously or something. But
Yeah.
everyone I approached, yeah, was very excited about wanting to tell the story.
Nice.
Um, but I think, like it's so nice um to have that back and forth, and trust your people. So I don't know, we tried to create this space where we didn't want to create a very um clear hierarchy. So I had an intern that I also gave so much freedom to also come up with, like, narratively, have an influence, and also in terms of like coming up with solutions, as opposed to me as a director wanting to fix everything. So that made it so much more fun to also work on the project, So
Yeah.
my intern had like so many great ideas that are in the film, and yeah, the film would not have been the same without him. So yeah, surrounding yourself with the right people is crucial, I think, and trusting them. Another thing is, I think, keeping things close, I feel, is often also, it really helps us, basing things on your own experiences or the experience of people around you. I think it makes for a very authentic experience, I feel. So it makes it almost feel yeah, it feels important that what you're telling, and it also makes it easier for other people to connect to your characters, or connect to the world that you're creating, or connect to the whole film. So that was also a really big thing that I thought was important. Um, and a third one, this is such a good question.
Well, it can just be top two. That's, I mean, a
yeah,
great team that you trust and something that feels very authentic to the story of who you are and what you're telling. That already sounds great.
yeah, yeah. Oh, maybe the third one would be being flexible. I think I feel
Yeah.
um, like I said before, like I feel animation is fairly, or can be, the pipeline can be fairly rigid. So once you start production, you start production and you start animating. But in I don't know, we gave certain shots away to specific animators, specific lead animators, and they did a really terrific job. But we also, throughout the process, learned that perhaps there were some animators that were better at very subtle expressions, and there were other animators that were better at really big movements. So in the beginning, we didn't really know that, and we sort of like just grouped all of the animators together, of being like, okay, you guys are just great animators, we want to work with you. But over the time, we realized, like, okay, you're really good at animating hands. So it was one animator who we just gave all of the hand shots to, basically. So all of the hand shots you see, one animator,
The
so
animator's probably like another hand shot.
exactly.
I'm so good at this, but
Yes.
like,
Another nail, another ring, yeah. But
yeah,
so we adapted, and it's important to, if you have a plan in mind, of
yeah, yeah.
to sticking to it sometimes, but also seeing, like, maybe it's also better if you as a group, you as a team, you as a director, adapt to, yeah, what is happening.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think you hit it on the head 100%. Trusting a team, uh, creating something that is really authentic to who you are, because audiences connect with those things rather than just like made up stuff for the sake of making it up, and
Yeah.
like being flexible with the team you're working with and the story you're telling. I think that's great. I'm wondering, is there anything that we didn't touch on, maybe as we're wrapping up, or that you wanted to share for people listening that we didn't really talk about yet?
Um, a good question.
Maybe somebody else who's going through and creating a short film and wants to really tell like an authentic story, and maybe they're in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think hmm. I mean, animation is like we it's such a beautiful medium, right? It's such a beautiful way to tell a story. And I feel like everything comes together in animation. Like you have to think about so many things. You have to think about the colors and the shapes and how things move and all these principles that are attached to it as well. But I think knowing or thinking very deeply about also maybe trying to capture like or thinking about why things move the way they do, or thinking about how also um, things are assembled. Because like I said, I really like editing and I really like thinking about puzzling things together. I feel like if you trust the story, if you trust the process, if you trust like what you're doing and thinking about all of these movements that you don't know if they're going to come together, I feel like trust yourself, trust your vision, and trust the story. And I don't know. Thing with animation is like often as you're doing it, it feels like you're never going to finish. It feels like an endless process. But until it's there, until everything magically comes together and you press play and you've created a movement, you've created motion, you've created your characters. So yeah.
Like there's a reason you're doing this in the first place. Like trust your instincts in the process, and you'll look back and be like, oh, it all came together.
Exactly. Yeah. There have been shots where I was like,
yeah,
this is never going to be finished, and now I'm really proud of those shots that are. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, Jonathan, we've talked about, where you came from, your journey, producing this film, what you're doing next. Is there anything else you wanted to share at all? So we're wrapping up.
No, I think we had a really nice conversation. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Well, it's been lovely to chat. I mean, I'm so happy I got to see your film and, pick your brain on how you produced it and the whole process and everything. And I think that's really cool. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Zari.
Of course. And if you're listening and you want to get in touch with Jonathan or watch his film or the process of it, or just follow him, you can do so by checking out his Instagram. And I'll include his personal Instagram and the Nice in Here Instagram in the description of this chat. So please go check them out. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.